Welcome to today's Explainer. We are about to go on this absolutely fascinating journey through time, tracing the sheer architectural and cultural evolution of sports venues. We're going to see exactly how we got from simple 19th century patches of grass, where maybe a few hundred people might gather on a weekend, all the way to the highly regulated, hyper-technological, multi-billion-dollar entertainment palaces that completely dominate our modern skylines. It's a story of engineering, economics, and honestly, our unrelenting obsession with live sports.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today's Explainer, which is basically going to guide our 200-year historical journey across the globe. 1. The oldest grounds. 2. The mega-capacity era. 3. The modern rulebook. And finally, 4. The billion-dollar palaces. Section 1. The oldest grounds. Let's step back in time a bit and tap into some of that early nostalgia. So, stepping back to the late 19th century, the real birth of organized sports venues, just look at how fast these legendary grounds popped up. I mean, it's wild. Over a span of literally just 7 years, from 1877 to 1884, we see this massive wave of iconic UK stadiums being born. You've got Rodney Parade and Stamford Bridge opening their doors in 1877. The very next year, Preston North End settled into Deepdale. Then comes Blackburn's Ewood Park in 1882, followed by Ipswich's Portman Road and Liverpool's Anfield in 1884. It was an absolute explosion of venue creation. And this brilliantly illustrates a really fun fact. A lot of these globally recognized football cathedrals, they weren't even built for football in the first place. Portman Road started out hosting cricket. Rodney Parade was primarily for rugby and athletics. Over in Spain, the oldest professional stadium, El Molinón, was literally built on the site of an old watermill. They all had incredibly humble, multi-sport, or even industrial origins before they took on the massive global football identities they hold today. To really give you a sense of the grassroots vibe of those early days, you have to hear this amazing piece of trivia about Deepdale. In their early years, Preston North End actually had a policy that allowed female spectators to attend matches completely for free. But they eventually had to abandon the policy on purely economic grounds because several thousand women started showing up for a single game. It just became way too popular to sustain. Let's move to Psy and see how this builds into Section 2, the mega-capacity era. Fast forward to the mid-20th century. By this point, the game has just exploded globally, right? And the architectural goal shifted entirely to raw crowd volume. Our absolute hero case study for this era is the legendary Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro. The Brazilian government had won the rights to host the 1950 FIFA World Cup, and they wanted to showcase their nation on the world stage at immense expense. So they commissioned this colossal, sweeping concrete bowl requiring a workforce of thousands to build on a really compressed 2-year timeline. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer, staggering context of that number. For the 1950 World Cup final, a match that actually ended in a truly shocking and tragic loss for Brazil against Uruguay, a game famously known as the Maracanazo, the official attendance was 199,854. Let that sink in for a second. Nearly 200,000 people in one venue. It remains the largest crowd to ever see a football game.
And as this quote from the historical records notes, this is a record that will almost certainly never be broken. Why? Well, back in 1950, the Maracanã was mostly these giant, sweeping grandstands with absolutely no individual seats. It was essentially a giant terraced standing section that allowed people to pack in shoulder to shoulder. The eventual modern shift away from standing sections means that crowd volumes like this are officially a relic of the past. But man, before it shrank, the sheer scale of the Maracanã allowed it to host an absolutely astonishing variety of cultural milestones. It wasn't just that 1950 World Cup. It's where Pelé scored his 1,000th career goal in 1969. Pope John Paul II held massive masses there. Frank Sinatra performed to 175,000 fans in 1980. And get this, the rock band Kiss, in their signature full makeup, played to 137,000 screaming fans in 1983. It was literally the ultimate mega venue for human gathering. However, the era of raw volume just couldn't last forever. Following some tragic stadium disasters globally in the late 20th century, strict modern safety regulations were finally enforced. The Maracanã went through decades of renovations to meet these requirements, converting entirely to an all-seater stadium. Because of that, its capacity has been slashed by more than half, down to just over 73,000 today. It is still a huge stadium, but the days of 200,000 fans, completely gone. Section 3, the modern rulebook.
So, why exactly was raw capacity completely replaced by strict, heavily regulated seating and amenities? Well, a great way to understand this regulatory shift is through UEFA's stadium categories, which rate venues from Category 1 up to Category 4. And honestly, the leap in requirements is exhausting just to look at. A Category 1 stadium, it only needs 200 seats. But a Category 4, which is what's required to host elite European games, needs 8,000 minimum. And look at the infrastructure demands. VIP seats have to double, and the required area for outside broadcast vans skyrockets from 300 square meters to a massive 1,000 square meters.
So if a local stadium wants to step up and actually host top-tier matches, they literally have to rebuild their architecture step by step. First, they lock down the minimum pitch and seating dimensions. Then it's a massive technology upgrade, installing electronic turnstiles to prevent counterfeiting and monitor real-time crowd flow, plus adding comprehensive CCTV everywhere. Finally, they have to carve out massive chunks of stadium real estate purely for media platforms, TV studios, and VIP parking. It fundamentally changes the entire purpose of the building.
So the crucial point is how all of this leads right into Section 4, the billion-dollar palaces. These strict modern rules absolutely paved the way for the hyper-expensive, premium-priced mega builds we see today. But before we look at today's price tags, it's important to understand inflation-adjusted costs. Basically, calculating historical building prices in today's money values. This is absolutely crucial because some older megabuilds, like Montreal's 1966 Olympic Stadium, cost about $1.1 billion at the time, but if you adjust for inflation, that would equal roughly $8.9 billion today. Building big has always been pricey, but what we're doing right now is on a completely different level.
Just look at these absurd, modern, multi-billion-dollar price tags. Now, this list is heavily driven by the United States and the NFL. Right at the very top is SoFi Stadium in California, coming in at an eye-watering $5.5 billion. Right behind that are the planned new stadiums for the Washington Commanders at $3.8 billion and the Kansas City Chiefs at $3 billion. Guys, these aren't just concrete bowls anymore. The sheer capital investment is astronomical.
And that brings us to our ultimate takeaway for today's explainer. Modern stadiums have evolved so far past just being simple grass fields to watch a match on. Today, they are highly complex, technological microcities. Their architecture completely prioritizes VIP luxury suites, massive global broadcast infrastructure, and maximizing the revenue they make per attendee, rather than just packing as many standing bodies into the venue as possible.
Which leaves us with a genuinely fascinating question. Think about it. If we went from old watermills and free entry cricket pitches to a $5.5 billion microcity in just over a century, as inflation rises and crazy tech like augmented reality and holographic broadcasting becomes the new standard, what on earth is the first trillion-dollar stadium going to look like? It is a wild thought to leave you with today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.